Hi, I'm Mike Thornton from Production Expert, and in the first two videos of this series, we looked at how music streaming is changing the way we deliver music to the consumer and how we need to change the way we mix and master because streaming services are now using loudness normalization and lossy codecs to save bandwidth. When we master for CD manufacture, the whole delivery process is lossless, usually 16-bit at 44.1K sample rate. However, most online delivery systems use lossy codecs to create audio files to reduce the file size or the bandwidth needed, typically MP3 or AAC for iTunes. Now, unfortunately, these codecs do not handle high levels too well, so we need to be able to monitor and control exactly what's going on very close to digital headroom. Otherwise, your music heard by your consumers could end up being distorted. Digital audio is like video or film. It's made up of a series of snapshots or samples. Traditionally, we've measured the peak level of the audio with a digital peak meter. That's actually reading the samples, typically 44,100 per second. But what this doesn't tell us is what's going on between the samples or between the snapshots. It may seem very picky, but did you know when you convert the digital audio back into analog, the reconstructed analog audio between the samples, the intersample peaks, could be up to 6 dB higher? And as we're working very close to digital headroom and processing audio with lossy codecs that are not very good at handling audio close to digital headroom, we need both metering and limiters that work to something called true peak. True peak meters will display what's likely to happen between the samples when the audio is converted back into analog, and we can also be confident that we will not overload these lossy codecs and so end up with distorted tracks being delivered to the consumer. This is achieved using a technique called oversampling, which enables us to measure the intersample peaks, i.e. what's going on between those samples, and so make sure that we do not try and exceed the digital headroom between the samples. We can then adjust our levels and make sure that our carefully crafted tracks are not going to be distorted by the time the consumer listens to them. MasterCheck from Nugen Audio has a true peak meter, and they recommend that if your mixes are going to be converted into MP3s, that you make sure that your audio doesn't go above -3 dB true peak. And for AAC files, you can go up to about -1 dB true peak. But as well as having a meter like MasterCheck that can display true peak, it's also very important that your mastering limiter is also working to true peak. What you may not be aware of is that most limiters are not working to true peak. And although there's no reason why you shouldn't carry on using your favorite dynamics processors in the production process, when it comes to the final mastering stage, having an accurate true peak limiter like the Nugen Audio ISL2 is absolutely essential. To demonstrate, here I have an instance of MasterCheck, and I'm feeding it from a limiter plugin that isn't a true peak limiter. Even though I've set the threshold of that limiter to -6 dB full scale, you can see how much higher the true peak meter is displaying on MasterCheck. Now I'm going to add in an instance of ISL2 after the sample peak limiter with the ISL threshold set to -6 dB true peak. And you can see that we're getting some gain reduction. But look at this second instance of MasterCheck, which is on the output of the ISL2 limiter, and all is as you would expect. No peaks above -6 dB true peak. When it comes to preparing masters for lossy codecs, which all music streaming services use to deliver bandwidth-friendly content to the consumer, it is essential that your tracks are mastered so that those lossy codecs don't distort. In the mastering phase, before your tracks are converted using a lossy codec like MP3 or AAC, you need to use a true peak limiter to protect the codec stage. For example, if you know that your audio is going to be converted to MP3, you should set the threshold to -3 dB true peak, as I've done here on my ISL2. The Nugen Audio Intersample Limiter is my tool of choice because it's so transparent. And unlike some limiters that are sold as true peak limiters, the Nugen Audio ISL2 does exactly what it's meant to do and does it transparently. I hope you found this mini-series of videos helpful in understanding how the workflow and techniques have changed. Now more and more music is being delivered to consumers using streaming services that use loudness normalization to keep their customers happy, so they don't have to keep turning the volume up and down.